Hey everybody, it is Thursday, April 18th. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm mo.news for our 501st episode, Jill.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts. Moshe, 501, not quite the ring as 500.
We promise in these next 500 episodes to still read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. But it's a long journey, Jill, to 1,000. But I have confidence we will get there.
It's a journey I look forward to.
Jill, I understand the countdown is now just hours until Taylor Swift's new album.
Well, that's right. The Tortured Poets Department, which she announced at the Grammys, will officially come out at 12 a.m. at midnight tonight. So it takes a lot to keep me up to midnight. I don't know if this is going to rise to the occasion, but I am definitely excited.
Jill, I understand numbers are really important to Taylor. I guess this album has 16 tracks on it, which represent the age she was when she released her first single. Among the many kind of deep pieces of information people will be looking at here, I also see a song called So Long London, which I imagine may have to do with a certain ex-boyfriend.
Yes, a certain ex-boyfriend. Meanwhile, it looks like there's going to be some collaborations with Post Malone and Florence and the Machine. So
everyone, prepare tomorrow for your social media to be blown up by a lot of takes on Taylor's new album. Still, going back to So Long London, she's so precise here with numbers. So this obviously is with Joe Alwyn, who she dated for about 6 years. They lived in London together. The track is 9 minutes and 28 seconds long, which lines up with September 28th, 2016, which was the day they started dating. So a lot of precision here from Swift on this album, as we've seen on previous albums.
Could we all just hope that the Travis-Kelce relationship works out?
Otherwise, she's got a lot of fodder for the next album, Jill.
She's going to have a lot of
So
material.
Long, Kansas City will be the next...
All right, let's get to some news here. A busy day on Capitol Hill. It was Columbia University's turn to face questions about anti-Semitism on campus. How did it go? Meanwhile, the Senate votes to dismiss impeachment charges against the DHS Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas.
Jill, it was record timing there. In less than 3 hours, they got through those impeachment proceedings.
And Congress is looking to fast-track the TikTok Divest-or-Ban bill. What a whistleblower says about Boeing planes and why he thinks the company should stop production of the 787 Dreamliner.
And the company's response. They have opened the doors to the factory to the press this week.
In tech news, Amazon's smart grocery carts are coming to some Whole Foods stores. So what exactly is a smart grocery cart? Unfortunately, Moshe, it does not give you any discounts.
Jill, I would have been disappointed if you didn't look into that.
And that NPR editor who accused NPR of having a progressive and liberal bias has resigned. And Beatles, the next generation, the sons of Paul McCartney and John Lennon, have put out a new song. And Moshe has on this day in history.
Jill, we are going to wish someone a happy birthday who many of us have to thank for getting us through high school. That's your clue.
On Wednesday, it was Columbia President Manoush Shafiq's turn to take questions from House members about the Ivy League University's response to anti-Semitism on campus. She has faced criticism for not doing enough to protect Jewish students and also to stop Islamophobia on campus. Notably, at least 2 professors at the college have openly praised multiple terror groups, including Hamas, for the October 7th terror attack, one going so far as to call it awesome. It seems that she learned something from watching the hearings 4 months ago when the same House committee questioned the presidents of Harvard, UPenn, and MIT. Shafiq had been invited to those hearings but couldn't attend. If you remember, back then, the presidents of the country's most esteemed universities couldn't say for sure if calling for the genocide of Jews was against the school's code of conduct. We edited a mashup of how school officials from Columbia answered the same question yesterday. First, the Columbia officials, and then we have the presidents of Harvard and Penn back in December. So take a listen.
So to begin, I would like to clarify something with a simple yes or no question for all of the witnesses. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Columbia's code of conduct? Mr. Greenwald.
Yes, it does.
Ms. Shipman.
Yes, it does.
Dr. Shafiq.
Yes, it does.
And Professor Shizer.
Yes, it does.
At Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, targeted at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. At Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment.
So, Moshe, at least in that regard, we now have agreement that calling for the genocide of Jews does not depend on context.
Jill, in a academic context, they had the answers to the test yesterday, so they had a much easier time with it this time around.
We should mention within weeks, the presidents of Penn and Harvard had resigned, although in the case of Harvard's Claudine Gay, it was because of plagiarism accusations. So this time around on Wednesday, Claire Shipman, who's the co-chair of the Columbia Board of Trustees, said, "We have a moral crisis on campus. The last 6 months on our campus have served as an extreme pressure test." She said our systems clearly have not been equipped to manage the unfolding situation. The school says it has suspended 15 students and put others on disciplinary probation over some of their speech or conduct related to the Israel-Gaza war.
So yesterday's hearing, much less contentious than the one we saw in the fall, still had elements of controversy. Some of the most pointed questions were asked about specific faculty members and comments on social media. These are the professors you mentioned, Jill, who have praised Hamas and other terror groups. One professor, Mohammed Abdu, has said openly he supports Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Hamas. He calls himself a Muslim anarchist. President Shafiq telling Congress yesterday that he has been terminated and that he will no longer work at Columbia once he finishes grading papers for his students this semester. There's another professor, Joseph Massad. He was the one who described the massacre of Israelis as awesome. He happens to have tenure. There is currently an investigation into him. She says, again, Shafiq, the president here, that he's been spoken to about his comments, but of course he has tenure, so it appears he will keep his job there, at least for now. Jill, as that was all happening in Washington, there was a huge protest happening on campus at Columbia as dozens of students took to the lawn to place tents, effectively what they call an occupation of the lawn, to demand that the university no longer invests in any companies that work with Israel. The university dismissing that, though it's unclear how long, though as of this taping, late Wednesday, it's unclear how long they're going to let them stay on the lawn there with their tents. This all speaks to the larger question right now about how universities are looking to balance students' right to protest with ensuring that campuses are free from hate speech and violence. This line that's been crossed here between free speech and hate speech. You heard Shafiq and other officials from Columbia say that their rules were just not updated for the modern era. That was their argument, that they were not ready for the post-October 7th context. One could argue that it didn't just happen after October 7th. We've seen this evolution on campuses for at least a decade now. That said, they say they need to update the rules. Across the country, in Southern California, at USC, there's another controversy that's unfolding here as the university announced in the last day that the school's valedictorian will not be speaking at commencement due to what they say are security risks. This all has to do with student Asna Tabassum. She's a Muslim student who majored in biomedical engineering and minored in what's called resistance to genocide. That was her minor. She will stay as valedictorian, but she has been removed from the lineup in next month's commencement. And it comes after she was criticized for some posts that she was linking to on social media that call for the complete abolishment of the state of Israel. Jewish groups said that having her speak would make Jewish graduates feel unsafe and unwelcome, given that she's calling for the destruction of the only Jewish majority country in the world. She says that USC is caving to fear and rewarding hatred by taking her out of the lineup. She says she asked about the security risks, that the university won't tell her what the security risks are. The university also not really telling the media what these risks are, but saying that they have seen a very concerning level of rhetoric since naming her and the revelations about her social media. And so they've decided, for the sake of the nearly 70,000 people expected at commencement, that she will not be speaking. Tabassum reinforces that this is a free speech issue, and she says she's not backing down on her views about the abolishment, the destruction of Israel. When she was on CNN on Tuesday night, asked multiple times by the anchor about those views, she would just say, "I stand for human rights." The question, of course, here is The question I had coming out of this, Jill, especially the USC controversy, was, is there more to the story here? Was she going to use that platform as a protest in front of everybody? And what were the nature of the security risks? And the university itself the university itself isn't commenting on the statements that she made. So the university taking the security route out of this, and I don't see this story cooling down anytime soon.
No, especially because there are groups that are calling for her to be reinstated as the speaker. She says that the speech is going to be about hope. But Moshe, I think that this whole issue, as you mentioned, really just brings to light the difference between, yes, you can criticize Israel, you can criticize a government. Where does that cross the line into just plain Jew hatred? And Moshe, I think symbolic of the current climate surrounding Jews on campus, this was something that lawmakers asked the school officials about at Wednesday's hearing. There was a pamphlet handed out at an orientation for the School of Social Work at Columbia. Mind you, it was created by students, but it defined a new word called Ashkenormativity, which they defined as a system of oppression that favors white Jewish folks being spelled Folx. Lawmakers saying that in and of itself fosters an environment of anti-Semitism. The officials didn't really have a good answer about it, except to say that they're going to make sure the pamphlet is not part of orientation again. But this is the School of Social Work, so a little troubling.
Yeah, I think one of the core issues that this gets to in the environment post-October 7th is it's totally fair to criticize Israel, like you can criticize any country. The concern that some students are having is that the criticism is not just limited to the country of Israel, but is becoming hostile and discriminatory towards all Jews.
And Moshe, this was not the only thing happening on Capitol Hill Wednesday. A very busy day down there. Over in the Senate, lawmakers held an impeachment trial. It lasted just under 3 hours, with Senate Democrats deciding to dismiss the 2 articles of impeachment against the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Mayorkas is the second sitting cabinet secretary to face impeachment charges, and the first one in the past 150 or so years. The House charged him in February with willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law and a breach of public trust over his handling of an influx of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. The votes to dismiss both charges were along party lines. Democrats found the first article charging Mayorkas with willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law to be unconstitutional. Senator Lisa Murkowski, she is a Republican from Alaska, she voted present for that.
She was the only Republican to sort of semi-cross party lines yesterday.
And then Democrats voted on that second article, which charged Mayorkas with breach of public trust. They found that to also be unconstitutional. The trial came to a conclusion before the House impeachment managers could present their argument.
Yeah, it was really quick, but this is the result we expected, I think, quicker than we thought, given Democrats run the Senate. So even if they had a full trial, he wasn't getting convicted. The Democrats are strongly imposing the impeachment effort, saying this whole thing was a political stunt and that the allegations fell far short of the constitutional threshold for impeachment. Now, while there were some Senate Republicans who were skeptical of these charges and feel that the House is sort of making a mockery of what impeachment is supposed to be about, high crimes and misdemeanors, they still all felt that a trial should be held here, that they should at least present the evidence and at least go through the process, that this sets a bad precedent in the future, that, the Senate now, when it gets impeachment charges, won't even bother to hold a trial, despite that being the tradition. Immediately after the vote, the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, addressed members, saying this is an unfortunate precedent. It doesn't make a difference whether our friends on the other side thought he should have been impeached or not. He was, Republicans arguing, and we should have heard all of the evidence. So the bottom line here, Mayorkas remains impeached, kind of like Trump, Bill Clinton, others who've been impeached, but not convicted. So Mayorkas is now free to continue to move about the cabin and remains in his job as DHS secretary.
Time now for the speed read from Bloomberg. The effort to force TikTok's Chinese parent company ByteDance to divest its ownership of the social media platform would quickly become law under a plan outlined Wednesday by House Speaker Mike Johnson. He intends to include the Divest-or-Ban bill in a package of fast-moving bills that include aid for Ukraine and Israel. The bill would give ByteDance up to a year to divest itself of the social media platform. that is longer than the 6 months that was given in the previous House measure. That longer deadline is among the changes proposed by Senate Commerce Committee Chair Maria Cantwell of Washington. She said she wanted to tweak the House bill to ensure that it survives a legal challenge. The House is expected to pass the bills on Saturday. The Senate is expected to quickly consider the legislation.
Yeah, remember, they're trying to say basically, hey, ByteDance, if you sell it to a non-Chinese company, TikTok can continue to operate here in the US. If you don't, we will ban it. Now, they arbitrarily gave them a 6-month deadline. Cantwell and some senators were concerned that's a little too quick. Let's go with a year here. They're hoping basically to have a good piece of legislation here that they can then vote on in the Senate, so they don't have to tweak it in the Senate and send it back to the House again, and then it has to go off to the White House. Remember, it has to be literally word for word the same from the House and Senate in order to go to the president's desk. It seems like some folks on Wall Street think that the TikTok legislation is in motion here. Snapchat shares were up as much as 10% yesterday. Of course, Snapchat, a key TikTok competitor. Remember, the Chinese government has said until now they have no plans to allow ByteDance to sell TikTok. We'll see if this actually gets passed, signed into law, what their final decision is. But that's where things stand, which means officially China says we're okay with it being banned in the U.S. Biden has said he will sign it if it comes to his desk. But remember, it's not going to be so quick in the Senate. The Senate likes to take its time, except for in that impeachment story we told you about earlier. Typically hold hearings, really dive into matters that sometimes the House passes much quicker. So it's not a sure thing yet whether the legislation as it stands, despite tweaks suggested by a senator, will pass in its current form. So stay tuned.
Staying on Capitol Hill, this from CBS News. An engineer at Boeing testified before the Senate on Wednesday that the aircraft company, in rushing to produce as many planes as possible, is taking manufacturing shortcuts that could lead to jetliners literally breaking apart. The engineer, Sam Salapur, said they are putting out defective airplanes. He said Boeing's emphasis on rapid production undermined its commitment to safety, claiming that managers are encouraged to overlook significant defects in the company's aircraft. Salapur says he was repeatedly silenced and threatened when trying to bring up safety concerns. He said he observed Boeing workers taking shortcuts in assembling its 787 Dreamliner.
Yeah, and apparently when he said something, he alleges that they moved him to the 777 program because of his criticism of the 787 program. And that's where he says, once he moved to the separate program, the 777 plane, he alleges that he literally saw people jumping on pieces of airplane to get them to align. Now, significant allegations here. You might have seen some interviews with him. I saw a clip of him on NBC News in the past day. As far as Boeing is concerned, their response is that retaliation is strictly prohibited at the company. A spokesperson for the company says they encourage employees to speak up, and that since January, they've seen more than a 500% increase in employee reports on a company portal that is meant to allow folks to voice their concerns. A Boeing spokesperson said the company is cooperating with the inquiry here and pushed back on the statements he's making about planes breaking apart. They say that an inspection recently of nearly 700 of the 1,000 787s in use worldwide turned up zero evidence of fatigue, and these have been flying for a bit. Two top Boeing engineers defended the integrity of the 787 this week before the media as they allowed some media into a facility. They said that the jet has been tested. They said that the 787 was stress tested for 165,000 cycles, which is beyond the expected lifespan of the plane, and never failed any of those stress tests. Separately, though, the Senate did hear testimony from members of an expert panel that did find flaws in Boeing's safety culture. One of the panel members, a aeronautics lecturer from MIT, said they have spoken to employees and that they hear Boeing leadership talk about safety, but workers feel pressure nonetheless to push planes through the factory as fast as they can.
From the New York Times, Uri Berliner, the NPR editor who accused the broadcaster of liberal bias in an online essay last week, has resigned from the network. He said in a social media post Wednesday that he was resigning because of criticism from the network's chief executive, Catherine Marr. Berliner wrote, "I cannot work in a newsroom where I am disparaged by a new CEO whose divisive views confirm the very problems at NPR I cited." In his brief resignation letter addressed to Marr, Berliner said he loved NPR, calling it a great American institution, and added that he respects the integrity of his colleagues and wishes for NPR to thrive and do important journalism.
Yeah, we told you about Berliner's essay for the Free Press. That's Barry Weiss's startup that really stirred up a hornet's nest within NPR. It made him already a pariah within the network. Some employees apparently told bosses they no longer wanted to work with him after seeing the essay criticizing the network. He was denounced by the top editor at NPR, and clearly here criticized by the new CEO of NPR. So in this essay, by the way, this essay got him suspended for a week. And in that time, this is the week of his suspension, he has now resigned. So a couple notable things from that essay. He says that, he loved NPR, but he felt that, especially around 2016 and the election of Trump, they went from truth-telling to actively trying to hurt the Trump presidency. He said that he often witnessed them picking stories to help Democrats or stories that were especially critical of Trump. He said that race and identity took precedence over merit and the importance of a story. And the bottom line for him is that he felt that NPR has become an institution telling people how to think as opposed to just bringing people the facts. You mentioned Catherine Maher, the chief executive of NPR. Well, not surprisingly, she is now facing criticism as people have churned up old social media posts of hers. In them, she repeatedly criticizes Donald Trump and embraces liberal causes. So all these quotes, Jill, come from before she worked in media. She actually worked for the organization that oversees Wikipedia. Running NPR is her first media job. Among the things she posted about Trump in May 2020, what is that deranged racist sociopath ranting about today? I truly do not understand. In another post from 2020, sure, looting is counterproductive, but it's hard to be mad about protests not prioritizing the private property of a system of oppression founded on treating people's ancestors as private property. So essentially they're defending looting. She also posted photos of herself wearing a hat with the logo of the Biden presidential campaign. Also posted about a dream she once had about shopping with Kamala Harris. Anyway, there's a lot out there from social media. It's gotten some criticism, though NPR defending her, saying she was not working in journalism at the time. She was exercising her First Amendment right to express herself like any other American citizen, adding that she is the CEO of the company. She is not involved in daily editorial decisions, does not impact coverage.
Moshe, somebody who is in management in news, I'm curious what you think about Maher's comment. I'm curious what you think about this whole thing. From Berliner's essay to Maher staying on the job and the fact that she was hired in the first place, I realize this could be an entire other podcast. But if you could just quickly tell us what you think, I'm curious.
Joe, there's an old expression, I'd rather have the people who work for me piss inside the tent than piss outside the tent. And by that, we mean Berliner wrote an essay, basically taking all of his colleagues, the organization he worked for, to task. So the fact that his colleagues weren't happy with him, the fact that he got suspended for a week, the fact that, the boss called him out, not surprised about that. In fact, I would be shocked if Berliner thought that he'd be working at NPR long-term for much longer after putting out that essay. So that's first things first, right? So as an executive, you typically want the people to come to you internally. Now, clearly, he felt he wasn't being heard, so it's time to speak out. So, he basically torched the place rhetorically. Now, as far as the CEO is concerned, Jill, I don't understand people putting all this stuff on social media. It's wild to me. And I come from a world in media where my views don't matter. Or where my views shouldn't matter. It's about the facts. Now, I understand NPR's argument that she's the CEO, which is a business-oriented job, and she's not involved in daily decisions. And having worked at a place like CBS News, structured similarly, our CEO ownership, I never got a call from them about coverage. They did their own thing. And certainly at the time, it was Les Moonves. He had his own politics. As he was once infamously quoted, Donald Trump might be bad for the country, but he's good for profits at CBS, which, again, didn't affect our coverage decisions. He is the boss. So that critique of Maher, you're going to face criticism when you write things like that and you run a media company. But I do think there's a larger story. So that's Berliner and Maher specifically. The larger story, though, I don't disagree with. We see this a lot. It's one of the reasons we started what we're doing here at Mo News, that there's more and more, even at traditional media. Again, I wasn't at NPR. I can't speak to it. But some of the things that he describes are things I witnessed at CBS News. I witnessed at previous, and by the way, I also witnessed at Fox News on the other side of the coin in terms of certain individuals, some on air, with political agendas, reinforcing their views and putting a little bit of bias into the stories that are purportedly are meant to be completely fair. So I will say that he has put his finger on something that is certainly happening in the media. They joke about something Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, I saw colleagues with that who lost their minds. But by the way, some of those colleagues were critical of Republicans no matter what beforehand. I think that you hope that management is able to correct for these biases. But he brings up a key issue, and it's one of the reasons why people have lost trust in mainstream media. But that is not to say they don't do good work. At the same time, some people messaged me yesterday, Jill, wait, you just posted these stories about NPR, and then you're posting an article they have about X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, because it's a good article. They're still doing good journalism there, and they still have some really incredible reporters and storytelling. At the same time, they clearly have some people who are, really putting bias into things, which leads you to question their organization. So like I tell people all the time, there's individual reporters, individual editors, but you can still have good reporting at some of these organizations from some of the better editors and better reporters.
I've been asked this question as well, just about bias. And I think you make a great point that this idea that somehow there's like a voice from the top that's dictating how you should tell stories, that doesn't really exist. I never experienced any.
Not at most organizations. Now, at some organizations, particularly the partisan ones, you do see that sort of behavior.
But individual reporters and editors can have a huge impact. Not that their reporting isn't correct, but they might leave out a few important pieces of information that might put something in context or make you think a little bit differently about it. And that's where somebody's personal political bias could have a very big impact.
And by the way, sometimes it's through negligence, just like they didn't know enough about the story. They got assigned it a couple hours before. But sometimes it has a little malicious intent. Like, nope, that's not how I feel about this. Or that person in that interview really pissed me off. So I'm going to tweak the story this way.
All right, Moshe, from ABC News, Amazon rolling out its latest version of smart shopping carts at Whole Foods stores. The carts track what you're buying as you go, letting you skip the checkout line. The Whole Foods in San Mateo is going to be the first in California and the sixth in the country to deploy the new technology. A spokesperson saying we've designed the cart from top to bottom with the customer in mind. In order to start using it, customers are given the choice to log into their Amazon or Whole Foods Market app using a QR code. And then after signing in, it's as simple as putting a few bags in the cart and you start scanning. As for produce, the cart has a built-in scale, which weighs as you go. It has sensor fusion technology, which knows the weight of everything. So the entire cart basically has a weight sensor.
So there'll be a built-in screen with a real-time receipt of all items in the cart, Jill. So you can know very quickly, like, whoa, that's more expensive than I thought. Or I haven't gotten to the dairy aisle yet, and I'm already past $100.
Which is why, Moshe, I actually like this idea more than I thought I would.
Jill, there was bound to be a story we could do about grocery stores that would make you smile as opposed to make you bang your fist on the desk here. Apparently, this will all be automated. Jill, it's only a matter of time before we have self-driving cars, or you put your car into self-driving mode. It goes to the grocery store itself, sends a little robot in there with a camera, and you can just, especially if you like to go to the grocery store, and see the stuff yourself, I think that the reality is, and technology here is quickly shifting. So this will be interesting to see how this works out. Though, Jill, it occurs to me, shopping carts are so analog, right? They're just very basic metal frames. They're going to need to hire like engineers and IT support now to support these computers, basically, that you'll be pushing around the store.
As I say to my kids, not my problem.
My cart can't connect to Wi-Fi. It's saying that I have 5 apples and not 3 apples. Please override.
This does feel like it is ripe for problems. In a perfect world, it will be a smooth operation, but you can see the opposite where it's just incredibly frustrating. From Variety, McCartney and Lennon, the next generation. James McCartney, the son of Linda McCartney and the Beatles' Paul McCartney, released the song Primrose Hill last Thursday. He co-wrote it with Sean Ono Lennon, the son of Yoko Ono and the Beatles' John Lennon. James announced the single. It is a ballad with echoes of the Beatles' style. On social media the day after its release. Moshe, I'm getting Beatles vibes.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it actually felt a bit like James Blunt to me as well, with like the guitar. But yeah, definitely throwback to their dads. Paul McCartney, proud of his son's work, touting it on social media, praising James and also saying, quote, lots of love to Sean Ono Lennon. By the way, if you're wondering, the two men are ages 46 and 48. Notable, Jill, also learning about Ringo Starr's son. His name is Zach Starkey. He's a drummer who has toured with The Who as well as Oasis. And apparently one person on social media on a Paul McCartney fan account said, sad, you can't just walk your own road. Basically calling them out, saying, you know, like, you're just like following in your father's footsteps, like make your own road.
Like they're Nepo babies, as
basically,
the kids would say.
like the son of McCartney, the son of Lennon are getting into music and people are like, you're just a bunch of Nepo babies. Well, anyway, the son of Ringo Starr replies and says, the Beatles are a wall you cannot go through, over, or under. I was 25 when I came to terms with that. Basically saying, like, what do you expect us to do? We're the sons of the Beatles. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1906. The Great San Francisco earthquake took place on this day. It still ranks as one of the most significant earthquakes of all time. More than 3,000 people died. 80% of San Francisco was destroyed. It is still remembered as the deadliest earthquake in U.S. history. A lot of lessons learned. Most of the city at the time was not fireproof. That's why most of it was destroyed. And for those familiar in the Bay Area with the 1989 quake, the 1906 quake put out 16 times more energy, to just give you a sense of how much more significant that was. Jill, still, I remember the great New Jersey earthquake of earlier this month. And the shake I had, I think the Kleenex box moved at least a half inch on my desk.
We'll always remember where we were.
We'll always remember where we were for the great New Jersey earthquake. On this day in 1938, Superman made his debut in the first issue of Action Comics. A happy 106th birthday today to Clifton Hillgas. Clifton, you might know him as Cliff for short, started Cliff's Notes in 1958 as $1 reprints of Canadian study guides for 16 plays by Shakespeare. At the time, he was a distributor of college textbooks. He knew hundreds of campus bookstore managers at the time, so that allowed him to put out the first edition of Notes. Now, Cliff would die in 2001, but we would all like to thank him at the Mo.news podcast for all the help he gave us crashing for AP literature in high school.
Moshe, and I'd like to think that Mo.news is kind of like Cliff's Notes for news.
Mo.notes.
Mo.notes.
We're launching them. Trademark. Trademark going into effect today. All right, we end here with a little music history. On this day in 1975, The Hustle by Van McCoy came out, one of your one classic 70s song. Also in music history, on this day in 1984, Michael Jackson underwent surgery to repair damage to a patch of scalp that had been burned during a Pepsi commercial. His hair literally was lit on fire as he was doing a commercial earlier that year in 84. He recovered, but then went through several surgeries. Unfortunately, he took a lot of painkillers, Jill, during that process. It led him to taking Oxycontin and to become addicted to painkillers, which would ultimately lead to his demise. And on this day in movie history, Jill, 16 years ago today, Forgetting Sarah Marshall premiered in theaters.
Moshe, that is a movie that is currently in my rotation, helping me fall as some light watching as I fall asleep.
Jill, Alex and I will often joke when we ask the other what the weather is like. We will say the weather outside is weather.
Moshe, it is so funny that you say that because my husband literally says that every time I ask him what the weather is. He goes, the weather outside is weather.
Is weather. Or when life gives you lemons, you say, F the lemons and bail. Anyway, that surfing instructor with among the many great memories from that movie.
All right, Moshe, that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
And check out Mo News, the interview today. We've put out, the premium folks got it last week. We have put out now our special edition with the reporter who first broke the news on Nickelodeon that led to the Quiet on Set documentary that so many of you have watched. That is now available for everybody over at Mo News, the interview podcast.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.